Namaste, I am Alokita and I'm joining from India. And you're welcome to this podcast on climate action figures, and I'm excited to be here.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new edition of Climate Action Figures. My name is John Whitten, and this week on the show, you get to meet Alokita, who was recently in Baku at COP29, and she will tell us all about that. But first, this week's Quick Fix, which comes to us in the form of a gift that a young listener sent us. Twyla sent in this cool little boxed set of cards that says, I love my planet. And when you open it up, each card has a little message on it. And so today we picked this card. It says, Did you know cars can be very damaging to the environment? The next time you're heading out, see if you can go on public transport, ride your bike, or even walk. It's good for the planet and good for your mind and body too. So thank you very much to Twyla for sending those cards in. We're going to use some more of those in the future. And welcome, Alokita.
Thank you. The quick fix is this very amazing idea because I personally have been using public transport from many years now. Because in the city I live in, that is the cheapest option also, but also at the same time it protects the environment. So transport is the major source of pollution in the area that we're living in, and if you are changing your habits to switch to public transport, it is also going to save the planet. And I think this is a really amazing quick fix.
Right. We've been hearing a lot about the pollution problems in India on our news stations. And so I suppose that makes it even more important for public transportation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you notice that in your region? You're in the north, correct?
yeah.
And do you notice the pollution in that area, or is that more in the south?
Pollution is majorly the problem in the north area right now, especially in the winters. You can see the smog is all around. It's very hard to even stay in the area that we used to live before, and a lot of children are suffering from asthma and other breathing diseases. So pollution is indeed a major problem in the north area, especially in the winters right now.
Now, Alokita, you've recently returned from COP29. Have you recovered yet?
I'm trying to recover, not just from the entire experience there, but also because you have to move out of your comfort zone in the city that you live in and completely to a new different area. So that kind of plays with your health also.
We've heard from other young guests that it was an absolutely exhausting experience, and a number of them were sick as soon as they got home. Did you experience that, or did you stay fairly healthy?
For me, initial few days were difficult because it was my first COP. And so when you go to COP, a lot of things happens at the same time. You have to be there at different moments simultaneously. So it gets really exhausting and you have to walk. And then, so sometimes you also forget to eat because you have to be there. And so that kind of impacts your health, but after a few days you kind of get used to it. So for me it was difficult in the beginning, but later on, like, I got used to of it.
When you arrived home, what was the thing you had been waiting for that you were so comforted by when you got back?
I was craving for the home cooked food, and so when I came back I asked my mother to cook for me. So that was something that I'd been waiting for, and also to meet my family members back at home. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, just tell us a little bit about that experience at Baku. What was that like for you?
So for me, it was a mixed experience. I was really motivated by the youth community that were there, all of us. Seeing them working throughout day and night and really being there in all the negotiations really inspired me. But at the same time, it was a major disappointment in the form of the decisions that were taken, because we were hoping for something better, especially in the climate finance initiatives. So that was kind of disappointing, but it was a mixed experience. So learning, but also at the same time being there and witnessing how things take place, all the decisions take place, was an inspiring experience for me.
We'll talk a little more about that in a moment. Just at the nuts and bolts level, tell us where you stayed and was it expensive?
So for us, like, it was indeed expensive because a lot of us there, for especially me, everything had to be arranged there. So it was a bit expensive. Through apps, we booked a few accommodation and we stayed there. So it was quite expensive. Yeah.
Tell us what an average day was like for you at the conference.
It was kind of hectic. We had to start from like 6 a.m. in the morning. So you have to rush to the area from where you can get the bus and then go to the venue. So you have to wake up in the early morning and also prepare for the entire day because we were part of the negotiations, and also we part of the bilaterals with different governments.
And on average, you said you got up at 6 often. What time would you end up getting to bed usually?
So I usually used to go back at 11 p.m. in the night. So 11 p.m. was my bedtime.
And being your first COP conference, what were the biggest surprises for you when you look back on it?
Okay, so one of the biggest surprise for me was that I was not aware really that youth can actually do the interventions in the negotiations and actually speak for other youth and other marginalized community. It was new for me, and but it was also a good experience because I got a chance to do the intervention, especially on the aspects of loss and damage. So space was indeed created for you to participate in the different events that was happening.
Right. And you say loss and damage was your kind of area of specialty. Tell us a little more about that.
So I'm part of Youngo. Youngo is the official youth constituency of UNFCCC. Within that, I am the contact point for loss and damage working group. So as a working group, we were majorly advocating for loss and damage related aspects. Our major thrust area was how loss and damage could be one of the subsets within the new collective quantified goals, and also how youth voices and how youth can be funded through loss and damage fund initiatives, and how it could be made equitable for the marginalized communities. That were the major points that we were advocating in the different meetings. So we developed position papers and also did the interventions, and also talked with different governments who could actually work on this area and also expedite this process. So that's what we were doing, and especially advocating for loss and damage under the different initiatives. Yeah.
We kept hearing in the news about this 1.5 trillion that was being asked for and the 300 billion that was ultimately agreed upon. Do I have my numbers right there?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
And somebody asked me, what would that money be used for? Is that what you're talking about here? Is that largely what that money would go to in the global south?
So right now there are two different aspects of it. One is the climate finance, which was the major key area, key things to be discussed in the COP 29, because it has been told that the this COP was for the climate finance, but loss and damage fund was something that came up in the last COP 27, and the whole year it was mainly about how those funds could be operationalized. The climate finance is different from the loss and damage fund, but what we were advocating was within the climate finance that was being discussed this year, how can loss and damage fund could be one of the subsets under it.
So, was there some financial agreement for loss and damage or no?
Yes, so in there was financial agreements. Scotland came up and like they agreed to contribute in this loss and damage fund. But still, a lot of things need to be done from other countries who could contribute to these funds, and also on how it could be made accessible to the marginalized communities, more on how could be bottom up approach for the funds to be distributed rather than the top down approach. But still, like, a lot of progress has been made, especially at the COP 29. Also for the entire years, a lot of discussions for the funds has been going on, and from 2020-25 it will come under the operationalization, but still things need to be done at the larger end. Yeah.
You mentioned Scotland specifically. Shout out to Scotland for doing their part.
Yeah.
Is it largely a voluntary decision for countries to step up and do that?
Yeah, I think they have to make up their mind and then step up for this. Yeah.
Well, it's good to accentuate those positive countries that are actually taking on that
Yeah.
responsibility, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we must appreciate them. Yeah.
Was it inspiring to be there for you amongst all these other people who are focused on this one concept of mitigating climate change?
Yeah, it was inspiring for me because as a someone who had been working at the grassroots level in India from 5 years, but then taking up those problems at the international level and then speaking about it to in front of the Secretary General in the meetings, different meetings, it was really inspiring for me, and I spoke from my heart to really how marginalized could benefit from these funds, especially in the non-accessible areas. Yeah.
So you spoke in front of the Secretary General.
Yeah, I was part of one of the high level meetings related to loss and damage. I was selected the speaker.
Wow, you must have been nervous.
Yeah, I was nervous because it was one my first time, but then I had my friends there who really motivated me, and that's why I could like put up my point. But since like it came from heart, so it was easy to like deliver it.
You mentioned your friends there. Is that other friends from your region of India or other friends that you've connected with through Youngo, or who are your friends there?
So these friends were from Yango. A lot of working group members were there, and they were from global north and south as well. Especially my co-contact point, he's from Germany, and so they were all really motivating me to speak up. Yeah.
Youngo sounds like a fascinating organization. We've heard a little bit about it on past podcasts, but tell us what you think is the most amazing thing about this organization, Youngo.
Yango is a fantastic space for youths to come together from all over the globe, from global south to global north. One of the most important thing is the diversity of the ideas. So we as a youth are from different areas, so ideas are really diverse, and especially we listen to each other. And then one of the most empowering thing is this all this is volunteering that we are doing apart from the work that we do. So passion is there. The youth are really there for change, and there is no office as such. We are doing it online, so a lot of coordination happens. So it's something that happens on its own because of the passion of youth to bring the change. So that is one of the most inspiring thing about the Youngo as a space.
So you were able to connect with Youngo youth. Were there other people you met that were really interesting there?
One of the collaboration that I'm really inspired by is Loss and Damage Youth Coalition. It's from youth who they've come together, and they're putting forward advocacy points for the loss and damage in the different meetings. This is something that has come up again from the youth themselves, and the activists they're working are really passionate, especially for the marginalized. And then there were youth who came from the other parts of the world, and they had different innovative ideas on, especially in terms of the technology. So I was really inspired at how at such young age everybody is inspired to do something, and especially in terms of innovation and technology. So that kind of inspired me to how I can also move from the advocacy to the implementation. Yeah.
We've mentioned Global North and Global South several times. What do you think is the most important message that the Global North needs to hear from the Global South?
One of the things that I've really found in this COP was that a lot of COP and negotiations are very technical in nature, and I believe that Global North is quite have the capacity to build those capacities, especially for the youth to deal with the technicalities. But for Global South, especially if I'm talking about youth, we lack in terms of the capacity in understanding these technicalities. So those kind of hand holding is required from the Global North to the South also, how we can build the capacity of each other.
With all of those technicalities and the bureaucracy that's involved with COP29, is it still a viable vehicle? Is it something we should continue to do? Is it valuable?
I think yes, it is important for different stakeholders, at least in these meetings, to come together and speak, because otherwise it's very hard to bring all of them together to one platform and then advocate or speak and then be part of these meetings. So this should continue, but at the same time, it's also important to come out with the tangible outcomes, especially in the coming COPs.
If you were in charge of the whole system, what is the one change you would make to the way COP operates?
One thing that I would want to change is how to convince the different stakeholders to come out with some concrete solutions and not get trapped in the jargons and technicalities. Yeah.
I read the other day that Al Gore, a former vice president of the United States, called for new safeguards that would bar countries without strong climate action plans from hosting the COP summits and stop the influence of fossil fuel companies. What do you think about that?
I think that is a very bold move, and if that happens, that is going to change a lot of things. Because right now, how the situations are in terms of the climate change, we need bold moves and we need bold actions, and such bold moves would be important for all of us as a community to deal with what is coming in the future.
He also said that delegates should be barred unless they could show that their companies that they represent met certain standards. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I personally do agree at this because ultimately we are not aligned with what we are speaking. It becomes very hard to advocate for the real change. So I do agree with this. Yeah.
Alokita, now that you're back home, we should talk a little bit about the climate mitigation and the actions that are happening in your city, in your state, in India.
A lot of efforts are going on to deal with the climate action, especially the city that I'm living. They have their own action plans of the climate on how to transition to the better space for us to grow as a society and also to preserve the environment. So so pollution, as you know, is the one of the major problems. But at the government level, they are coming up with the solutions and speeding up the process of how this can be tackled across the areas. And a lot of focus has also been on the technology, on how technology could be leveraged to deal with the climate issues. So government is paying efforts to change at both level on how to change the citizens in terms of their mindsets on the climate, and also how to make the plans of the communities, groups, and the country as a whole more feasible in the coming years to deal with the climate change.
Alokita, in your life, is there an organization or a person who has really inspired you environmentally? Like, who's doing the work that needs to be done in your view?
For me, as someone who has worked at the very remote locations, it is always the activists at the local level who have inspired me, because solutions come from there, solutions come from the local communities. So we generally have the self-help groups in India who are doing great work at the rural area especially. So within that, there are women who are the local activists who have inspired me and changed me as a person. I started from a very early age, and I learned it from them to how to advocate and how to bring all the stakeholders together. Especially it gets very difficult in the rural areas to work with the different stakeholders. So these local activists are the real inspiration for me. Yeah.
Well, that's encouraging to all of us, because if change happens at the grassroots level, then it's up to us to take
Yeah.
action. On that note, you've told us about all kinds of wonderful things you're doing. What's the climate action that you've chosen for sharing with us today?
At personal level, what I have changed in the past few years is to I don't generally go for the fast fashion. I buy only limited clothes, whatever is necessary, and then of course the use of the public transport that I've told you before. So these two changes are the small steps that I've taken in the past, apart from what I do at the global level. So I think these personal changes are the two things that I've been doing so far.
What gives you hope today, Alokita?
What gives me hope is the passion of youth, especially my friends who have been working tirelessly for us to survive and to see that changes happen, and to keep up the hope even if the solutions are not coming. And so their passion derives my work. Their passion to see the change and keep on working is something that gives me a lot of hope. Yeah.
Well, Alokita, all the best as you move forward in these grassroots building motions that you're talking about. And we thank you so much for taking time to meet with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thank you, dear listener. We will be back again next week to hear from another climate action figure to give us their angle on COP29. Until then,
Go figures.
This has been Climate Action Figures. Our show is produced and hosted by John Whidden. Our creative consultant is Kayla McIntosh. Our theme song is Hawaii Vacation by Tavari. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Climate Action Figures. That's all one word. And if you have any other questions or comments that arose from this or any episode, feel free to reach out to us at climateactionfigures@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another Climate Action Figure.